for another installment of Cooking with Susie. This time I'm going to actually attempt baking. Baking is not something I do very often. I traditionally don't have the best luck with baking and haven't found recipes that I enjoy. There are a couple things I make regularly, which are my double chocolate mint cookies around Christmas time. And then a few months ago, I came across this recipe. We call it Judy's Famous Cranberry Surprise because my friend Judy had made it and I loved it, and so I got the recipe and I've been making it as well. Today there are going to be a couple of variations on the original recipe, which I'll note as I go along. So as you can see, I've gotten my ingredients all out because I find it easier once everything is all out at once. And the other thing that I did was I pre-buttered and floured the bundt pan. This recipe is made in a bundt pan. I'm sure you can make it in another kind of pan, but I like the way it comes out and it makes really nice slices and looks really pretty. To butter and flour the pan, take a chunk of butter, maybe between 1 and 2 tablespoons. I usually scoop it up in a paper towel, and you really have to work it in there because with the bundt pan you've got those creases and crevices. I mean, you can see there are a couple of spots that aren't completely covered. And then I take about a tablespoon of flour and I throw it in there, and then I just sort of pat it around so that the flour coats everything, including the center part, because that's going to help your bundt cake come out nice. Okay, so let's see. What do we do to? Oh, and the oven is preheating at 350 degrees. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to combine 2½ cups of flour. And there's a reason I'm making it in this bowl that has a spout, because later we're going to pour these ingredients into our mixer. And I've just found over the last few times that I've made it, it's easier to pour it out of a bowl with a spout. But obviously if you don't have a spout, it's not a big deal. Okay, so that's 2, and now we need a ½ cup measure. Surprisingly running low on flour. 2½ cups of flour with 1 teaspoon of baking powder. My measuring spoons. One teaspoon of baking powder and 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. So for that, I'm just going to use my 1 teaspoon measure and estimate it. Because it's coming out spouts, I'm pouring it over the sink so I don't get salt over everything. Okay, that's about 3/4. Okay, so let me get a spoon. I'm going to combine that, try to mix in the ingredients as much as possible. Okay. Oh, it says whisk. I guess it really doesn't matter, but I didn't read ahead. Where's my whisk? But I'll whisk it. Whiskey business. Oh God, that was bad. Okay. Mix well and set aside. Now, this is the part I'm going to have to vary. You're traditionally supposed to mix a bag of fresh cranberries. You're going to take a bag of fresh cranberries, put them in a bowl, sort through them to make sure there's no mushy or rotted ones, and then coat them with a little bit of flour. Unfortunately, we've been unable to find fresh cranberries, I think because they're out of season. You could probably use frozen whole cranberries, but we couldn't find those either. So, and I've never done this before, so I don't know how it's going to come out. I'm going to try to use dried cranberries. So I'm not even sure the amount, but I'm going to use about a cup. One for the cook. Now, in a mixing bowl, I've got my mixer ready here. Something I only bought a couple of years ago, and now I don't know how I ever lived without it. Now we are going to mix 2 cups of softened butter. I'm sorry, 2 sticks of softened butter. There's 1. And there's 2. With 2 cups of sugar. Actually, pour this. Scoop doesn't really reach in there. That's 1. And that's 2. Okay, now I'm going to mix this to combine for about 2 minutes until light and fluffy. When using a mixer like this, it's best to start out slow to at least incorporate the ingredients together so they don't all go flying out, and then you can turn it on. If you have a hand mixer, that would work too. You're probably going to need a good quality one. For my hand mixer, I use a KitchenAid, which is the only one I've found that I don't blow out using it on a thicker recipe. So it's a good investment. They're not that much more money than like a cheaper brand that you can get, but they're much better quality. So I'm just going to beat that for a couple of minutes till it gets light and fluffy. I don't know if the cameraman wants to get a shot of the mixture. I can try to take it out and show you what it looks like. Okay. A lot of the batter is still stuck on the mixing blade, but that's okay because we're not really done with this part yet. Okay, now we are going to add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and like in my last segment, I'm using Penzeys Mexican vanilla extract. Penzeys makes the best. Okay, I'm just going to briefly mix that in. Now, we're going to add 4 eggs that have been sitting at room temperature. The recipe calls for large, but I almost always have jumbo or extra large at home, so I just use those, which is fine. Now, I'm going to incorporate these one at a time. But what I always do, one of the little tricks my mother taught me early on, was I always break my eggs into a separate container, because you never know if you get a piece of shell in there. You don't want to ruin your whole batter with that. Where's my pouring shield? Okay, I'm going to put the pouring shield back on the mixer so that the eggs don't go everywhere. That just helps guide it. So these are going to get mixed in one at a time. Oh, I also just recently saw a good tip for breaking eggs without shells. I didn't do it for the first one, but I'm going to do it this one, which is to just gently tap it on the counter instead of breaking it on an edge. And it does seem to work pretty well. I'm just going to tap and break. No shell. That's 2. Oop, double yolk. 3. 3.5, I guess. And another double yolk. So this is going to be nice and rich. Okay, so I'm going to let that all mix up. Then, just mix that a little bit more. Then, and this is why I like the bowl with the spout, I'm going to pour about half of the flour mixture in. I'm going to turn this down while I do that because I don't want the flour to go flying everywhere. Okay, so that's on the lowest setting. Now, I don't measure to get an exact amount of half, I just eyeball it. It's all going to go in there eventually, so it really doesn't matter if you're not exact. Okay, so again, I'm going to let that incorporate. And what do I have? Half a cup of sour cream. Okay, this is another variation. The original recipe calls for half a cup of sour cream, but the person who gave me the recipe, Judy, she told me that she always makes it with using full-fat vanilla yogurt. So that's what I've done the last couple times, and it's come out delicious. But this time I'm going to try low-fat vanilla yogurt because that's what we have. It doesn't matter whether it's Greek or another nationality, but I'm going to try it. I haven't tried it with the sour cream. I'm sure it's very good too. The sour cream is delicious. It's probably slightly sweeter using this yogurt, and I think the taste of vanilla really pairs nicely with the tartness of the cranberries. Okay, so that's close enough. Okay, this one's harder to pour through the pouring shield, so I'm just gonna lift up my mixer and dump that in. And mix that in. Put the pouring shield back on. And now I'm going to add the rest of the flour mixture. Get a spoon. That's better. By the way, there's the mixing blade that the KitchenAid comes with, which is this one, which is fine, but I bought one, they sell one that has a rubber sort of gasket along one side of the mixing blade. That's what I use because it really helps get those ingredients off the side of the bowl and does a much better job, I think, of getting everything really mixed in together. So it's not that expensive. They go on sale, or you can use a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon. It's definitely worth it. Okay, so what's next? Okay. So this is nice and mixed. Let me see if I can show you this. That's what our batter's looking like. And now I am going to fold in the cranberries. Now, even whether I'm using the whole cranberries or trying the craisins, like I'm doing, as I said, for the first time, I suppose you could gently fold them in with a spoon, but I've just found it just as easy to do it with the mixer, and they're not so gentle that the mixer is going to tear them or break them in any way. So I just find it easier. I just leave it on low and I don't go for a long time. I just eyeball it and make sure they look like they're mixed in pretty well. Okay, that's really all it needs. Now, I think, yes, now is time to put it in the bag. in the pan. Okay, so as I said, I have my flour and buttered bundt pan. Oops. Let me get a spatula thing. Oh, wait a minute, let me see one I like better. In with the clean stuff. Rubber spatula. The first thing I'm going to do is scrape off as much of that excess that's stuck on the blade as I can, get that back into the bowl. But there's always a little left on the blade, which of course I like to lick off, even though I know the health experts tell me I shouldn't do that because it's got raw egg, but I like to live dangerously. Okay, so now we just take our batter and we smooth it into the pan. What I usually do is kind of scoop a little bit in several parts of the pan, and then once all the batter is in the pan, I just smooth it out with my spatula. It's going to be really interesting to see how this comes out with the dried cranberries or craisins, TM, as you know, since I haven't done it before. I thought about using blueberries because they're similar in size and I love blueberries, but I'm not sure. The blueberries don't typically have as much tartness as the cranberries, plus they're softer to begin with, so I'm not sure both flavor-wise and texture-wise if that would come out as good. I'm still going to try it sometime though. I thought about even throwing some blueberries in this one to see how it came out, but decided just to use the dried cranberries. So, I don't know, can you see me? I just want to show, you know, what I'm doing here, which is just smoothing out the batter to try to make it as even in the pan as possible. Again, this is not an exact science. It's just to try to make sure that it bakes evenly. Okay, that's pretty good. And now, I'm going to stick it in the oven, I think. I can't imagine there would be anything else, but I have to look at this. Okay, bake in the center rack of a preheated oven for 50 to 55 minutes, or until the top springs back, or a cake tester comes out clean. So let me put this into my oven. And I'm going to set the timer for 50 minutes. I usually set the timer for a little less than how long the recipe calls for to check it. But since I have made this recipe a few times, I know that it usually needs at least 50 minutes. So I'm going to set it for that. And in a few minutes, I'll be back to show you what the final product looks like. Hi, everybody. Okay, my cake baked exactly for 50 minutes, and it was definitely springy, and I used a wooden toothpick to test it, and it came out clean. So then after I took it out, I let it cool for about 10 minutes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take sort of a flat, I usually use like a butter knife. You could use a plastic knife. You could really use any knife that's kind of flat and straight so it'll go around the sides well, and just loosen it up. The pan is still hot, so I'm just running it around the outside edge. And then I'm going to run it around the inside, which is a little tougher, but because the inside is a little more sloped. But you want to try to keep that knife as close to the edge of the pan as you can. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over. So I'm going to take my cooling rack, put it on top. Which actually wait a minute, I'm having trouble doing this. Try to do it this way. The cake kind of puffed out over the top plane, so that's why the cooling rack wouldn't lie flat on it. So I'm wearing the oven mitts because the pan is still hot. Oops. And there it is. So that's our cake. Oops, looks like a little bit of it broke over on this side. Probably because I didn't squish, I probably should have squished that cooling rack onto it and then turned it over. I think in the act of turning over the pan without anything to hold it, it kind of got a little fragile. It also could be because the ingredients are a little bit different than usual, but I don't know if that really made a difference. So it's still warm and needs to cool, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some, oh, this is another variation in the recipe, by the way. The original recipe calls to make an orange glaze, which is usually the combination of orange and cranberry is delicious, but I haven't made the glaze because it's very sweet and sticky, and so I just prefer to put some confectioner sugar on it because I find the recipe is sweet enough, and with the tartness I don't want the added syrupiness of the glaze. So anyway, I'm going to take some confectioner sugar, pour it into my strainer, and then just tap it. Obviously, you can use as much or as little or none at all as you want. And that's it. I will come back in a little while after it's been cooled to slice it up and show you what the final product looks like. So now that the cake has fully cooled, probably, I think I let it cool for maybe an hour or so. I'm going to cut it and we'll see how it is, okay? Here's one slice. And there's another slice. So normally when I make it with the fresh cranberries, the whole cranberries, they kind of burst and you get these little sort of, not only the cranberries, but like a little bit of color running through it. So this is going to be a little bit different. Let me get a couple of forks, and hopefully my cameraman will join me in tasting, and we'll see how it came out. Okay, want to taste?
Yes.
Come on over, if you can. What do you think?
That's good cranberry.
Not bad. I actually, to be totally honest, I think I might have overcooked it slightly. I don't know if that had to do with the cranberries being different, because obviously the dried cranberries don't have as much moisture in them as the fresh cranberries, but it tastes a tiny bit dry to me, but the flavor is still good, and I think that the dried cranberries taste good. I mean, I do think it would be better with the fresh, but this is not a bad substitute.
Yeah, I would agree. It doesn't have that, burst in your mouth flavor.
Right.
But I still think it's moist.
Oh.
And I definitely like a moist cake.
Don't we all?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I'm going to take another bite and I have to get back to work.
Well, hope everybody enjoyed Judy's famous cranberry surprise with a few changes made by Susie. And hopefully we'll be back with you soon. Bye.